Welcome to the Asian Dating Podcast. Today I have JT Tran of ABCs of Attraction. And I've known JT, I've known him for about 15 years now. And when I started the business with matchmaking, I was helping men and women meet Asian women. And I was always fascinated by JT's boot camps and programs and how he taught men of Asian men and actually all ethnicities to be better at dating, right? Because dating is a skill. So, welcome to the show, JT. And I will put all of your bio in the show notes as well. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much, May, for having me on. It has been like over a decade. Like look at us now, right?
I know. I feel so old as I watch your stuff on social media, and I'm always picking up tidbits like, man, this is great. I love how you, Asian man, have helped a lot of other Asian men out there succeed in dating. Now, what have you learned in the past 15 years that you feel like, you know what? Every guy should know these three things or these five things. Like, what are some of those tidbits you have for us?
Well, specifically for Asian guys, like obviously we have to remember, like as Asians, we're not like a monolithic group, whether we're like born here like I was or like coming in internationally. The way I approach coaching Asian men is like in a holistic way, like mind, body, and emotions, right? And so I'll have students that might have internalized racism or like these heavy limiting beliefs. I was born and raised in the South. I experienced a lot of racism. So I had to fight through a lot of those, belief systems, and it took a while to deconstruct. While, I have students that might come in from over China, Asia, and they come here and they don't understand why they aren't as successful as dating as they were in China versus here. And they just have to learn the difference between American dating versus like Asian dating. And there is a difference. While other times, I've had guys that just didn't know how to dress, didn't know how to like carry themselves physically, whether it's fashion or body language. And so it's important for every man to sort of like take a self inventory, be realistic, or ask a friend or something to really evaluate you. And it's like, where, which areas do you need help? Is it in the mind, right? Is it in like how you talk, or is it like in your body, like how you like display your sexuality and your masculinity? So, it's very hard, obviously rambling a bit here, but it's very hard, as Asians, because Asians, we're so different. The way I teach Asian American born here is very different from the way I would teach someone like born overseas. So, it's important to be able to like look at the individual and see and diagnose and prescribe like what's going to work for him.
So you mentioned dating in Asia is different than dating in the US for the Asian man from Asia. How does that differ? Like, what are some things that he sees that, wow, I can't do that here in the US, or it's not appreciated by the women here? Like, what are some of those things that you've noticed?
Yeah, so I've literally had guys that were like the sons of communist generals, like from in the Politburo, right? Like heirs to billion-dollar fortunes. These guys, they go like Wharton, UPenn, they're driving a couple of Lamborghinis. And back in China, they're the apex male. Like women are approaching them, women are throwing themselves on him. So he comes to America and he doesn't understand why like no American girl gives two shits about him. He doesn't give a shit about his money, and like his style is very different, right? It might be popular in America, I mean in Asia, but not popular in America. Same thing, hairstyle, stuff like that. So like he has to adjust to the differences, right? Where in especially in America, authenticity, the ability to freely speak your mind, right? That is linked with the idea that's genuine and that's authentic. While back in Asia, there's the idea of like you got to save face, like don't do anything that's embarrassing, don't do anything that people would judge you poorly on because it reflects back on you and your family and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on, and so what I find is a lot of times for like international Asians coming over here, they don't necessarily have a lot of the inferiority belief systems that some Asian American guys have being raised in racism. They just lack the technical knowledge of what to change. Also, the language barrier is an issue. I had like a student where, for example, like he was complimenting a girl and the girl was like into it, her and her girlfriend, he was just engaging them. And, coming from a conservative Chinese background, the girl has like this belt. It's got like belt buckles and stuff like spikes and studs on it, right? So it's kind of different. And he just says the first English word that comes to mind. Oh, it's like, oh, that's kinky, right? Which in his mind, would just kind of translate that's different. But she took offense to it, right? He didn't mean it in a sexual way, but that just happened to be the word that came up from Chinese to English. And I just told him, like, in those cases, just like play up the fact that, hey, you're a Chinese tourist, you're international. Just say like, oh, pardon me. It's like, I'm English isn't my first language, and in that regards, most people are willing to be kind to like an earnest like immigrant or a tourist, right? But that's kind of like some of the differences between international Asian versus like local Asian.
But that's a first interaction that that gentleman might give to the lady, but how does he go about wooing her? How does he go about asking her out? Like, what are some things that he can do to encompass his old values in Asia, but yet now he's adapting to the American style of dating?
So I always find that in-person game, personality, charm, confidence, riz, whatever you want to call it, is so much more effective in person. So if you see a girl, whether it's daytime or nighttime, the ability to just go up and approach her, talk to her. I especially encourage my Asian students to do what we call like a direct style, which is essentially you're complimenting her, you're showing sort of like romantic intent without trying to protect your ego, but you're not doing it in a catcalling way. Right? It's more like James Bond as opposed to like, James Stifler, right? The idea is like you go up there and it's like, hey, I think you're beautiful. I'd like to get to know you better. Right. And in that way, like every girl on some level, if she's, the majority of American girls have never dated Asians, right? Like that's a fact. But they are going to draw some sort of dating knowledge, what I call like the dating cloud, iCloud, if you will. So where is that knowledge going to be drawn from? Like Hollywood, media, friends, girlfriends, guy friends. What did they say about Asians? And unfortunately, some of the stereotypes that exist is that Asian guys aren't that masculine, aren't that sexual. So by going direct, by saying like you are fucking beautiful, especially in an accent, that one is a real killer for any international. That fucking when a student say that you are fucking beautiful, it blows their mind because the juxtaposition is so different. It forces a woman to evaluate him not as a stereotype, but as an individual man. And so that breaks the ice. She sees him for who he is. And from there, obviously, you've got to like project your personality and connect with her. But that is obviously the first step: getting up there, breaking the ice, introducing yourself, and making her see you as a man, not as a stereotype, but as an individual, unique human being.
So you're saying that works for other men of other countries, just to go up to somebody and say that to a woman to really kind of get her attention and be like, oh, wow, like a little bit of a shock, but yet a compliment, but in such a way that it's kind of crass?
No, what I'm saying is, well, there are two situations, at least on their approach. So like daytime, nighttime. So like the more you are fucking beautiful might be more of a nighttime thing
Nighttime.
because it's like cutting through like the music, the noise, everything like that, right? So it is kind of that shock. But you also have to understand, like studies have shown that when you actually cuss, you are judged to be more honest and trustworthy.
Mhm.
Right? Because when you cuss, like you're saying it, as an authentic way. Obviously, you don't want to cuss like a sailor because that's too much. But that one individual, you are fucking beautiful, right? Really cuts through the noise, makes her look at you. And then you don't have to say that. You can, like I said, always say, like, I think you're beautiful. I like to get to know you better. Like probably during the daytime, because the daytime is a lot more subtle. The energy is a lot more lower. There's a lot more nuance to it. And you don't want to like say that out loud, like at a coffee shop, but you
Yeah.
could say like, hey, I really noticed you from afar and I know I'd be like kicking myself in and introduce myself and say like, I really like your style. You seem to have like a cool personality. Right. So there are adjustments to each situation.
Does that work for the guys? Is that like a open liner that you teach your students?
Yeah, we teach like nighttime, daytime. We want our students the ability to be able to approach in any environment, right? Because you never know where the future love of your life could be, right? Whether it's at the Whole Foods or it's at the bar lounge, you know, it all boils down to having the confidence, the emotional, like collectedness to be able to approach, like regardless of the situation. The words rarely matter that much, right? In so much as it's more of like how you say those words. So, once you realize that, approaching a woman in any kind of environment becomes a lot easier.
So what if the guy is a little bit shy, little bit awkward, maybe an engineer, maybe a Dungeons and Dragons kind of guy?
Get a lot of those.
But yeah, how would he learn to approach a woman at a coffee shop or at Whole Foods?
So, with someone that has a lack of a romantic experience,
Mhm.
it's important not to sort of like put all your eggs in one basket, right? The idea is to engage in like sort of what's referred to as like immersion therapy, right? If there's any kind of like stimuli that elicits a negative response in you, anxiety, fear, you want to put yourself in that environment enough times, and as you get closer and closer to it, like it starts to desensitize you. So in this regards, you want to be able to approach numerous enough times so that like the first time you go out, that yeah, you're scared, but you do it enough times, then it becomes sort of like second nature. Now, night game, going out to bars, clubs, lounges, I get it. It's not everybody's cup of tea, especially if you're older, but it allows you to practice in sort of like a pseudo sort of like video game environment, if you will, where when you have like zero experience, you can go and you can make mistakes and be awkward, and it's okay. Right? It's like completely okay because like the next day the level resets and everybody forgets. So if you can like approach, 10 times on Friday, 10 times on Saturday, and maybe do some day game. In a month, you've done like 100 approaches. And by that time, you're able to do probably what is the most important skill, which is to emotionally self-regulate, right? Have that emotional self-awareness where you're not panicking each time you talk to a girl. You can be cool, calm, and collected. And then that's when you can really show off your personality, right? I know a lot of students like want to be able to like know the exact words, what to say. They'll try to memorize an entire script, right? But what happens when you put into this environment talking to someone that you find intimidating, that's someone that's eliciting an emotional response, is you get into like fight or flight response, right? That's like what happens. And either like you want to run away or you freeze up. And the only way to get over that is to, desensitize yourself to the negative stimuli to the point where you can, regulate yourself, and then you can actually display your emotions. So yeah, I mean, long story short, just do enough practice approaches to the point where it becomes a little bit more second nature. And then when it's actually go time and you actually find someone that you find attractive, you won't be making those mistakes.
But what if you do make a mistake? Do women find that cute if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just a little nervous because you're so beautiful? Like, can they say anything to kind of let the woman know that this is an authentic reaction I'm having? Or does that make it look stupid that you're just, you're like not cool when you do that?
Well, it's sort of like you can call the elephant out in the room, right? You can literally say like, "Hey, I don't normally do this. I'm very nervous, but say, I think you're very cute. I want to introduce myself." So you can lean into that emotion. And again, it is the idea like when someone is earnest and honest and, being nice, it's very hard for most people to react in a truly like mean manner. Like, yeah, you have some outliers, obviously some women that, that get their kicks off of that. But very rarely will people like kick a puppy dog, right? So if you're feeling truly nervous, call it out. And it sort of like defuses um it defuses that situation because you called out the elephant in the room. They recognize you're nervous, but now it's no longer really an issue.
Mhm. So, how would I hit on somebody at the gym if I was a guy and I find a cute girl at the treadmill or hanging out at, I don't know, the smoothie station? Like, how would you go about approaching them? Same way, like, hey, I just wanted to come up here and introduce myself. Otherwise, I would just kick myself if I left and I didn't make any kind of contact with you. Like, are there any smooth lines that they can use?
Well, the gym is a much more nuanced place, right? I know like a lot of girls really don't want to be approached at the gym. You can if you see what we call indicators of interest from the women, like eye contact, and she's like smiles at you and stuff like that. If there is the lack of that kind of IOIs, I would generally avoid it because again, I've heard like definitely a lot of girls like they don't want to be approached at the gym. They're hot, they're sweaty. It's like they don't want to talk, right?
Yeah.
But if the girl like looks at you and you kind of do like that, it seems like you're both each other's gym crush, then sure, you can like be like, if she's got her earphones in, you go like, and then like, pantomime taking out the earphones, like, hey, I noticed you, looking great. I want to introduce myself. But in those situations, this is like one of the few times I would wait for IOIs. In general, I don't wait for IOIs simply because I'm not like the classically good-looking guy by Western beauty standards, so I never get it, right? So I always go in and I create their attraction from like scratch. But the gym is like one of those places where like a lot of girls just don't want to be approached unless she's signaling you.
Yeah. Okay. So gyms are not the best places to approach a woman.
Yeah, and if you flub it, right, like you guys see each other, all the time, and it's that awkwardness. So,
What are some success stories that you have of recent that kind of surprised you and how well your student learned your stuff and found
uh,
someone great?
sure, sure. So I've got like maybe two, both on like opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So I have like Andy, 49-year-old older Asian guy, divorced, right? So, obviously it was like, heartbreaking, life transforming, like hit the bottom, you know, just everything just crushed. And he had to get his life back together, right? And so he has entered sort of like his fuckboy era, right? So he's like, not gonna get married, already did that. I just want to enjoy life now. And so now like we've helped him go from, that post-divorce sort of depression to where he's entered his fuckboy area. Like he's literally like, and that's his choice, right? Where he is sleeping with, younger, attractive girls, like some of them like Instagram models to the point where like even I'm like, damn, like that's truly impressive. And then you've got the other side of the spectrum where, I had a student and his entire goal was just to get a girlfriend, right? It's someone he found attractive. Specifically, like he wanted like a Latina girlfriend, and he was part of her long-term training. And he was able, like, literally halfway through the program, he quit because he got the girl. And he's like, I'm done. I got her. And the thing is, like, he got her while day gaming, while walking his dog, right? She had a dog and he complimented the dog, right? This is a good day game tip, right? If you see a girl, don't compliment her, compliment her dog. Cause that is like complimenting her. Cause of course, like I'm a dog parent, I'm a dog dad. Like you compliment my dog, I'm like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So he complimented the dog and then they were like had some dog dates and then they started dating and then he was like, victory, I'm out, got my goal and I'm out.
I love it. I love it. Now, when I match make Asian men and women of all ethnicities, I feel like a lot of the women in my pool respects the Asian man. They're educated, they have really good family values, they're honest, they're authentic, they're not a whole lot of game playing because if they want a relationship, they genuinely work towards it and find it. At least the men that I work with, the men that come to me for matchmaking services. Now, do you find that your men believe that? Do your men that you work with believe that they are a great catch because they're educated, they're smart, they come from a good family, they want to have kids, or they're religious, or whatever that may be?
Yeah. I mean, because my clientele is like predominantly Asian guys, they tend to be obviously educated, career driven. but they've been career driven so long they forgot to smell the roses and actually enjoy life and have that sort of like personal relationships. And in general, I find like with Asian guys and my students, the majority of them want a relationship, right? Like very few actually want to play the field. Like some do, like, you know, Buddha bless them and everything like that, but the majority want to be with someone that they choose, and that is really important because up to that point, I would say a lot of them, the girl chose him, right? It wasn't someone that he necessarily wanted, found attractive, but like she was literally the only girl that showed any interest. And so he's like, okay, no one else likes me, so I guess I'll go with her. And you know, that's yeah, I guess to use one of my finance bro students, he's a Wall Street guy, where he's like, yeah, it's like I've spent so much time working on myself, getting a nice body, you know, finance is on point, you know, making really good money. I'm emotionally self-aware. I've done all this work. I need like the highest ROI, return on investment. And I want a girl that has worked on herself just as much as me and not just simply picking like the low-hanging fruit. And unfortunately, as Asian guys, because we face so much sort of like sexualized racism, you know, there isn't as much sort of like demand for Asian guys unless you actually go out there and create that demand yourself. So yeah, like a lot of Asian guys, they want some sort of relationship. Like, you know, some of them want to play the field a little bit, have some fun, but the majority want some sort of girlfriend. Now, you know, some want marriages, some don't, you know, but I would say that as Asian guys, we tend to be a lot more relationship driven, probably than other kind of like groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, do you find that some Asian men are more appealing than others, like different countries? Which ones are the popular ones right now? Is it like Korean because of the, you know, K-pop, or is it Japanese because the baseball player? Like, does who are attracted in your field determined by pop culture at all, or not really?
Well, sort of. Like I was saying, like K-pop definitely introduced the new idea that there are other valid forms of masculinity that don't have to conform to like American, you know, masculine archetypes. However, having said that, it isn't super popular in America. It exists. So yeah, like, you know, maybe the more Korean type of guys might find a little bit more attraction from women, but it still remains a little bit of an outlier. However, whenever we travel, you know, we have our Euro tour that's coming up in October. That's our like inner game program for Asian guys, and as well as our Latin tour. Whenever we travel, that K-pop archetype is very strongly pronounced.
Mhm.
Like there will be times when I'm in Europe and people will stop in the street and just like ask to take photos with me. It's like, you K-pop? It's like it exists internationally. You know, you know, it's not that pronounced though in America, but you know, yeah, the K-pop thing definitely had an effect. But it sort of like depends on like a location.
So are you saying that Asian men are more sought after outside of the US?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. By like you know, an absolute magnitude.
So in your perfect world, what do you tell the women who you meet about Asian men? Like, what do you say? These are the reasons why an Asian man's a good catch. Like, what are some things that you've noticed? Like, man, these women are really missing out on Asian men because Asian men are this, 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 and this. Like, what do you think in your 15 plus years of experience of working with Asian men?
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna try to convince them, you know, it's as I always say, like you can't change a woman's mind, but you can change your mood, right? There will be women that aren't into Asian guys, period. And that's fine. Like everybody has a choice and everybody has a preference. But I can choose and encourage my students to choose to display ourselves, right? Don't explain, express,
Mhm.
whether that's confidence, dominance, sexuality, express who you are. Like trying to convince a woman, oh, you should totally go for Asian guys. Like that's just not going to work, right? So one of the things, there are very few things that we can control in this world. right? We can't control other people's actions. We can't control how they react to us. The only thing I can control is what I do. So I'm more like in the realm of self-improvement is like improve ourselves as an individual, right? And stack the deck as heavily in my favor as possible so that she chooses me, right? But everybody has their own choice, and a woman gets to decide who she wants to go home with, who she wants to date, blah blah blah. I will just control what I can do and stack the deck in my favor to say like, hey, I'm the best choice for you.
Great. I love that. I love that. So I know you do a lot of in-person coaching with your male clients. What are some tips that you can give the men listening about online dating? Like, what are some things that you've recognized that, hey, this would beef up your online dating profile, or this might help you a little bit?
Yeah. So, we have to recognize that online dating, like according to multiple studies, online dating for Asian guys is, very unfair, right? It's an uphill struggle. Like one study said that an Asian guy had to make $247,000 more than the white male just to get the same response rate, right? So that's a Rolls Royce, like literally like a Rolls Royce, right? So I don't want guys to think that is impossible, right? But what it does mean is that you probably have to put in a little bit more work than the average mid-white guy, right? So, first of all, the pictures are more important than anything. More important than profile, bio, your opener, whatever, right? It's like picture, picture, and picture, and then maybe like a distant fourth is your bio, right? So when you take a picture, this is a big concept to understand. The female gaze versus the male gaze, right? So breaking that down really quickly, there is like the male gaze, which is very obvious. Whenever we see someone, we tend to be very object specific, right? We see her boobs, we see her butt, whatever. So we think other people view us that way. So a lot of times, guys will take a bathroom selfie, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to show off my abs. I'm going to show off my muscles. Click, right? And that picture is in some dirty, dingy, ill-lit room. So yeah, it shows that maybe he's got a body, but the woman is looking at it from the female gaze, sort of looking holistically at the entire picture and imagining the story behind it, the narrative, the lifestyle. Who is this kind of guy? Right. But he's thinking, oh, she's going to check out my muscles and my abs. No, she's looking at the entirety. Right. It's poorly lit. It's kind of grungy. This guy looks like he's a frat bro. And like, yeah, he's got a nice body. And so if I want to roll in the hay, sure, I might hit him up, but there's no long-term potential there. Right. So instead, you want to switch, right? When you take a photo, get like a professional photographer and you can go to the beach, right? Lay out a yoga mat and you can go shirtless to show off those muscles and do like, whatever yoga pose. And you do it during the golden hour where it's really good, lighting and the background is beautiful over the ocean. And you've accomplished like physically the same thing. You're still showing off your body, but now there's a story behind it. Now she can project like, okay, this guy seems interesting. He's a little bit outdoorsy, maybe a bit spiritual with the yoga. Oh, and he has a nice body, right? So that is the difference between the male gaze versus the female gaze. So if you're going to take pictures, and again, pictures are the most important, get a professional photographer during the golden hour and try to tell a story because she's going to project some sort of narrative, some sort of story about your lifestyle, your personality, right? So yeah, like, take really good pictures with a professional photographer, but always remember the difference between the male gaze versus the female gaze.
So are there other poses that they should do aside from the yoga beach pose on the guys?
Well, it's going to be individually, to each person. Obviously, if someone who is overweight probably can't do something like super athletic, but, if you like to play basketball or your tennis, pickleball, or you surf, you can try to take something athletic. This is especially important for like Asians, right? Especially if you want to have a well-rounded sort of dating pool and not just sort of going for one type of girl, but like for all girls to widen your dating pool is you want something like, yeah, maybe professional, but also something that shows a little bit of sexuality, maybe the athleticism if you have it, or even if you don't necessarily have it, something that shows off your masculinity, maybe like a bad boy sort of pose, rent a convertible for a day, right? And go on some sort of rooftop, and now it looks like you're a little bit carefree in this convertible or whatever. Just have well-rounded pictures that display more of your lifestyle and personality than your normal sort of LinkedIn headshot that you would submit for a resume. Show a well-rounded person, because every guy listening to this, you're more than just your job, right? You're more than just your career. Like, be the kind of guy that the friends, like to hang out with, like to do adventures. You're masculine, you're fun, you're athletic, you're sexual. Show more of your personality than just like one type of photo.
Now, JT, what made you get into this field of helping men gain some game and have confidence? Like, what made you 15 plus years ago to say, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to help men with. And what made you pick this idea?
Well, I would say this was more like a calling, because back in the day, I wasn't good with women, obviously, and I eventually learned like pick up, psychology, and I applied it, and then I started this Asian Playboy blog, right? And I would write about my adventures and misadventures, my victories and my humiliations, right? I was like one of the first to like really put myself out there. Um, and I gained the following until one day this Chinese Canadian mother called me up, right? She wanted me to help out her teenage son who had been harassed by neo-Nazis in high school. And like he stayed in his room, never dated, didn't make any friends. And she told me like, okay, I want you to fly up to Toronto and like help my boy out, and like I'll set you up with a car, I'll set you up for a hotel, and I'll even pay you. I'm like, holy shit, I can get paid for this. And so like I tell him, ma'am, for 3 days and 3 nights, I will be the big brother he never had. Right. So that's how I came up to ABCs of Attraction, where we teach like what I call the ABCDEF system, which is simply like an acronym where each letter has three main components: inner game, outer game, and verbal game. Right. So like, A is attitude, attract, approach. Attitude is like your emotions or confidence. How do we regulate our emotions and anxiety? Then attract. How do we enhance our body language? Display that sexual market value, right? And then like the actual approach. What do you actually say to the girl? And so like I knew teaching this 17-year-old like kid, I didn't want to teach him like pickup techniques per se, because he needed to grow up to be his own man. And if I just taught him a whole bunch of routines to memorize, he would stuck in this sort of like robot, right? So I gave him the training wheels, but I allowed him room to grow into that, to be his own person, such that like he at the end of the day can decide what type of personality he wants to display. Right? So yeah, that's how I got into like that and started the ABCs of Attraction.
So, for the advice that you give out there to the men listening, is it really just practice until you feel comfortable and you gain confidence and you see what works and what doesn't work, and you just be yourself, but yet kind of try to have some charisma and be funny and make eye contact?
Well, as I always say, confidence is not learned, confidence is earned,
Mhm.
right? Confidence comes with experience and action. And when you repeat it enough times on like a daily basis, and you have discipline, it becomes part of your identity that you are confident, right? You can't simply like, say like, I'm going to be confident today. And like all of a sudden you're 100% confident, right? Especially when it comes to women and you lack any kind of like emotional romantic experience. It comes from interacting with enough people, being able to navigate, peer circles, the navigating, displaying like social intelligence, right? Having that kind of high social intelligence to be able to be dropped into any kind of like party, be able to make friends and understand women, and having the ability to empathize and put yourself in the woman's shoes and not simply like thinking of yourself, right? increasing your emotional intelligence, if you will. And that isn't going to come from just reading or watching videos. That comes from practical experience of meeting people, putting yourself in other people's shoes and experiencing in life, both the adventures and misadventures, making, the victories, but also the rejections and the highs and the lows. And when you do that, like the ability to emotionally regulate yourself so that you are confident, but you're never like, necessarily like butthurt if a girl rejects you, right? Because, as they say, we've got to check our male privilege, and that for women, dating is dangerous, right? And when you understand that, when you put yourself in a woman's shoes, like a lot of times, like girls, like, oh, if I, you know, reject this guy, is he going to be angry at me, right? It's like when you experience that, like you start to understand, like, hey, it's cool. You rejected me, it's good. I can move on, and you're completely, not affected or unnerved by that. And that becomes part of your identity, that you are confident. So yeah, confidence comes from action and experience. It's not theory crafting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, let's say I have a client who prefers that we go in the field and talk to women. What would be some advice that you can give me to help him be more comfortable talking to women, that we're both out there kind of being his wing woman? What are some tips you can advise me on?
Sure. So I would say for the complete newbie, I'm assuming like they're a newbie, he can use what I call the Kickstarter opener. This is a very low investment type of opener. And the idea is you're going to use social etiquette in your favor, right? We're all taught, like, from an early age, certain forms of behavior that engage your autopilot response. So we don't even have to think about it. So for example, if you go up to a person and you say, hi, my name is JT, it's like automatic, everybody understands you shake hands. Like you don't have to think about it. So in a bar club setting, you can do the same thing, which is simply you go up to a person and go like, cheers, right? It automatically engages that social etiquette behavior, that autopilot system where they're just go like, oh, cheers back. They're not thinking about who is this guy, how long is he going to bother me, is he weird? It's just like, okay, this is, engage this, automatic, routine system that I've been taught since I was a kid. And you go like, cheers, my name's GT, what's your name? Start a conversation. They're like, hey, yeah, we're here celebrating our friend's XYZ birthday, whatever. Come by and say hi later, right? And so one of two things can happen where she might be like, oh, okay, bye. All right. And that's fine. Like you've already predefined your exit strategy. So it's not like you're being rejected. Like you're already leaving anyway. The other is like the bonus round, right? Where she's like, oh, who's your friend? Or like she keeps engaging him. And in this way, you get to put in a little bit of practice, right? A little bit of conversation with very low rejection rate, such that, again, the idea of immersion therapy, you slowly lower your anxiety, the fear response, such that in like maybe the next time you go out with him, he can then, maybe go a little bit more balls to the walls and like really go up to a girl that he's super into and say like, hey, I think you're fucking beautiful, right? But that is like the Kickstarter is like a very low, newbie friendly way of getting someone out there for the very first time.
But what if we're at a coffee shop where we're not cheersing other people? Like, how would I go about engaging with the women?
So again, this is going to be more tougher if he's like extremely new, because daytime is more obviously more brightly lit. Like every mistake he makes is going to be so much more called out, so much more obvious than nighttime. This is why I prefer starting newbies at nighttime, because it's more newbie friendly. You can make all the mistakes, right? Um, and I mean, if you're going to go daytime, then I would avoid what I call like the home field. The home field is where it's like, your own little backyard, little coffee shop where there's not a lot of foot traffic. You want to go where there's like high foot traffic, high volume, like a mall or, the park if you're in New York or wherever there's like a lot of people walking to and fro. And, in that way, you're not sort of, taking a shit where you eat, so to speak, right? And, it isn't like the barista going like, oh, it's that same guy who keeps hitting on all of our customers, right? And if you want a low investment opener, you can always do sort of like the Starbucks directions opener. I was like, oh, pardon me, a little bit lost. I'm looking for the nearest Starbucks. Do you know where it is? And they're like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, you mean, it's like, oh, actually, I didn't need to know where the nearest Starbucks is. I just thought you were really cute and I wanted to introduce myself. So that's also pretty newbie friendly for the daytime.
Okay. I love it. I love it. So before I let you go, JT, what are any last minute tips you want to give the listener that might help them this weekend if they go out, or maybe their intermediate level? Like, are there any tricks, not for newbies, but more of intermediate kind of guys out there have more dating experience?
Beginners think what to say, is the average think how to say it, experts think where do I take her, right? This is where like dominance and action comes in. So assuming like you can go up, talk to a girl and know what to say, now it's time to take action. Like, where do I take her? Not only just physically, right? But like emotionally. What kind of emotional journey are you going to take her with, right? Like, so it's both physical and mental and emotional. So, if you feel like this girl is, maybe someone that you want to take home, go beyond the act of having a conversation with her. Like, move her, go on like move her from the bar out to like the diner or something like that. Or if you're doing day game, go from the park to like, hey, I'm about to go grab some coffee. Join me. What we call an instant date. Movement, right? Because if you can't move a girl from the bar to the couch, how are you ever going to take her home? Right. And the same thing, even on a date, right? If you're going on dates, create like a dating triangle strategy where you go for, I don't know, drinks and apps, right? To maybe like, dessert, and then, third place, and then home, right? Movement, right, is as they say, tactics, amateurs study tactics while experts study logistics.
So are you saying that if she is willing to follow you from the bar to the couch, like she's showing signs that she's a little bit into you?
Yeah, like every woman, has agency, right? She can choose to follow you. She's choosing to follow you. She's choosing to follow your direction, your leadership. You're not forcing anything. And this also tells you how, if she's into you or not. Because again, if you can't move a girl 10 feet away, then obviously she's not gonna, go home with you or, give you her number or anything like that. This way, you're able to determine, is she really attracted to you if when she follows you, she does what you ask, because she has a choice. She can say yes, she can say no, right? And so when she says yes, she starts to slowly invest into you. She starts to follow you. She starts to follow your leadership, your confidence, your masculinity.
Does that work for women too? Like if she likes somebody, she can ask him like, hey, this is really loud in here. Can we just move it outside? Like, do women
Exactly.
do that
Yeah.
too to men?
Yeah. Yeah. You could be like, oh, my throat is parched, so let's go to the bar. Or I could go, do a smoke. Let's go to the patio. Or I love this song. Let's go on the dance floor. Right. Just give like any kind of reasonable excuse. And like most guys are clueless. They're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, JT, thank you so much. I so much enjoyed talking to you, and I hope we could do this again. And I'll put all of your information in the show notes. And yeah, I just really love this stuff. I love the other psychology with the men. Like I work with the part where the men think they're already ready to date, right? They just say, hey, give me the women and I'll make magic happen. But you're starting from the ground up where you're building their confidence and helping them be more charismatic and more confident and things like that. So I love how all the work that you do to help the men out there is just amazing. So great job to you.
Oh, thank you so much, May. I mean, hey, we're both helping our Asian people however we can.
I know. I love Asian men. I think they have a lot to offer women. I feel like they are kind of overlooked as a quality guy, and whether, they're 5'5" or 6'5", it doesn't matter. Like I've never had a woman say, oh my gosh, my husband is so amazing. He's such a great father to my kids, our kids, and he's such a great husband to me because he's tall. And I know people are so hung up on the height thing when they talk about Asian men too. So it's very interesting. So ladies out there, thank you for tuning in to the Asian Dating Podcast. Women, if you're single, please fill out a profile with me at 2asianmatchmakers.com. That is how I can find you. And men, if you need help looking for a lovely Asian woman, please contact me. And maybe you just need to hire a matchmaker.